Hi, I'm Jack, and welcome back to Real Opinions. And today I'm going to be reviewing Raw, which is a cannibal horror film coming out sometime in 2017. And it's basically about a young vegetarian girl that loves animals and wants to go to veterinary school. And so it's following the week of her hazing ritual going to this veterinary university. So she's the typical neat, prissy girl. So as this week goes on, the first kind of challenge for these vets, which you'll see in the clip, is that they have to eat, I believe it was a rabbit liver, rabbit kidney, which obviously she's just against because she's vegetarian. She's never had meat before, she's grown up vegetarian. And from there, they kind of have more and more trials for these vets. But after that kind of first taste of meat, it's kind of following her spiraling out into having weirder and weirder tastes. Yeah, cannibal horror seems to be having some kind of resurgence in the last few years. I'm no horror expert, definitely not a horror expert, but I've just noticed that it seems to be a trend that's coming back, where I hadn't really noticed it with films before. It works on me. For horror, I find it disgusting. You may have already heard a tiny bit about this film because there was a news story that went around a while ago. I think it was Toronto International Film Festival where this was shown, and apparently several people fainted during the screening of it. I wouldn't say it was bad enough for anyone to faint. I mean, it's 18 in the UK, R in America, and it does have some graphic imagery, but I didn't even know it was going to be a horror going in, and I didn't find it particularly awful enough to faint. I feel like people fainting is more of a PR exaggeration than it is a legitimate thing. It's a bit like how you hear when they first screened The Exorcist, people were vomiting in the aisles. It's like it's the next way of shock advertising almost. And sure, while that may be true, that's a outlier definitely, and you won't feel the same way. That being said, there were bits where I did feel slightly sick in this film. I am not particularly strong-stomached for that kind of stuff. Harrison knows this, but I cannot stand body horror or anything like that. And so there's one scene particularly, I think it's around 1/3 of the way through, where it felt like 2 minute long sequence of this girl just vomiting hair. And oh my I've never felt so close to throwing up in a cinema, and it's enjoyable. As you can tell, I'm laughing with it, but it's if you want that kind of gross out stuff, you might like it. It's not as grotesque as Bone Tomahawk was last year, and some people even said that was kind of hyped up too much for its gore, and so don't go into this expecting a full-on gore fest. But what I'm trying to get to is that if you can watch some horrors but not all horror, I'd say that this is within your realm. It's not so far shock and horror that it's completely out of your league. Right, that's kind of talking about the scariness of it. Let's go into the actual quality of it. Acting wise, I was actually pretty impressed all the way through. I don't know any of the actors from anything. I assume this is kind of their first roles, as it is a very small time film. And yeah, acting wise, I mean, it's kind of an unbelievable story, but they do very well to settle it into it actually being believable, and their reactions to certain things are, I don't know, I think it sells it very well. And I think that acting in horror is always overlooked because you just kind of think scream queens or something like that, and it's so easy to go from to the extreme emotion of being scared. People don't really view it as being as hard to act as, say, dramas, but I think that doing things like that and serious acting in a horror is almost harder because of how just broad and cheap the genre is sometimes. But the acting in this was good. I'd say it definitely it held its own. And I think direction wise, this film did win Best First Feature at the festival, London Film Festival, and out of the ones that I saw in that category, I'd say that it was the best. I didn't see all of them, but I think it's a good first film, definitely, and it's a good sign of things to come. They just do very well with what they have. It's a very small set, it's a very small film, and the director manages to pull out, I think, the best out of the performances as well as the locations and things like that. You can't really tell so much that it's a shoestring budget, but at the same time you understand that it is, and I think that it did very well within that. And the camera work as well, it's not particularly flashy camera work. There are the occasional kind of impressive long shots here and there, but I think that it does very well to sell the drama of it. The first shot alone, it's tense, it's kind of sets the tone for the rest of the film, and then it goes into the kind of more standard indie realm of cinematography, which isn't incredibly amazing, but they managed to do very well with what they have again. The biggest problem I have with this film is its story, which is, right from the offset, it's just stupid. just this person spiraling, and it's within the space of a week. This vegetarian going from having one bit of meat to full on cannibal is ridiculous. Just in that, and it's what they while they manage to play it with enough conviction throughout all of the film, as it gets towards the latter half, and it has to kind of amp up the drama, it gets even more ridiculous, and the ending was a very disappointing ending, I'd have to say, and dumber than everything that kind of came before it. You can see where they're setting up the dramatic stakes right from the beginning. You can see kind of where it's heading. There are the occasional twists and turns, but after they've happened, they kind of lose all weight to them. I believe it's written by the same director, so that's kind of not a shame, because I think the direction is way better than not so much the dialogue writing, but the story as a whole. I think dialogue into individual scenes is actually pretty good, and it's very naturalistic while maintaining that horror, that kind of underlining threat of a horror. But at the same time, where the story overall goes, and it just... I'm not saying that it should have taken itself like a dark comedy or anything like that, but it takes a very stupid premise very seriously, and that kind of comes off as laughable towards the end when it's not meant to be. It's trying to be serious. And on top of that, even though it was one of the hour 40, which is longer than most kind of first horror films, it didn't feel long at all. It felt very quick, but then at the same time it felt like the ending was a very sudden stop and like I said, it was a very disappointing ending, not only because of that, but just disappointing in general. I think that for the typical horror film viewer, I would definitely say that this is worth a shot. You'll know within the first 20 minutes, I think, if you like it. That's not when it saves its gorier scenes for later and later on, obviously, and it's more like, after the kind of first tiny bit at the beginning, it feels more like a indie drama for a lot of the time, which will put some horror fans off, definitely. And then once it gets into the more horror stuff, it gets dumber, but at the same time, I think that it was still kept the technical quality of before. And when it does get to cannibalism scenes, it is unnerving, I'd say. But not enough, I think, to leave you, quote, doing one of the movie poster quotes of scariest film of all time or scariest film of this year or anything like that. Just, I think for somebody that maybe likes this style of horror, they'll enjoy it. Great, so that was Raw. Yeah, and it should be coming out at some point in the coming year. No idea when. Hopefully I can find a proper trailer to cut this to. If you've already had the chance to catch it somewhere, tell me about it in the comments. It would be nice to kind of talk about the film. And if you're not, well, you can maybe come back after when it does eventually come out. Yeah, and if you want to watch more reviews, we have more on the channel. You can also follow us on social media, and we have the podcast as well, which goes up on this channel and iTunes and Stitcher and all of that. Great. Thank you, and goodbye.